is a kind of ridiculous moment that happens in the probiotic aisle. You go in thinking this will be simple. Maybe you want something for your stomach. Maybe you just finished antibiotics. Maybe a friend told you that her probiotic changed everything. So you pick up one bottle and it says 50 billion. The next one says 10 strains. One is for bloating. One is for immune support. One is refrigerated, which makes it feel more serious. Then the bottle beside it says shelf stable, which makes you wonder if the refrigerated one is just being dramatic. And after a few minutes, you are not really shopping anymore. You are standing there with a little bottle in your hand thinking, which strain am I even supposed to take? How much is enough for this to work? And why did this help my friend, but the last one did absolutely nothing for me? The label has no room for that conversation. That is the strange thing about probiotics now. They are sold like a simple daily habit, but the moment you try to choose one, the simplicity disappears. A few generations ago, most people were not trying to buy gut health this way. They did not have a supplement aisle for it. They had a kitchen. They had jars, crocks, bowls of cultured milk, cabbage salted down until it made its own brine, cucumbers sitting for days with garlic and dill, and small sour things that appeared on the table without a speech. It was just part of the food. I'm Sophia River, and this is Old World Remedies, where we look at the forgotten household ways that still make sense today. And I want to be careful with this story because the internet loves to make it too clean. The easy version would be, modern probiotics are a scam, old kitchens had the real answer, and everyone should throw away the bottle and eat sauerkraut. But that is too simple. Some probiotic capsules are useful. Around antibiotics, for example, certain probiotics have been studied for reducing the risk of antibiotic-associated diarrhea in some people. Reviews, including Cochrane's work on antibiotic-related diarrhea, are careful about this. The benefit is real enough to discuss, but it is not universal. So this is not a story about fake science. It is a story about what happens when a specific tool gets marketed like a universal answer. In plain language, a probiotic is not just good bacteria. The NIH describes probiotics as live microorganisms intended to provide a health benefit. But the important part is in the details. Which microorganism? Which strain, what dose, and what you are taking it for. That is the part the front of the box cannot really explain in big friendly letters. A study on one strain does not prove every bottle with a similar sounding name. A probiotic used for one digestive problem does not automatically become useful for every broad promise that fits under gut health. And that big number on the front, 50 billion, 60 billion, sometimes more, is not a scoreboard. More is not automatically better. A smaller amount of the right studied strain for the right reason may make more sense than a giant number printed on a box because it looks impressive. That is not nearly as satisfying as a label that says daily balance. But it is much closer to real life. Real life is where many people get disappointed. They take the bottle every morning and feel nothing, or they feel more bloated and wonder why a healthy product made them uncomfortable. But when you remember what probiotics are, that is not so mysterious. They are living organisms entering a gut that already has its own history. It is less like opening an empty room for one perfect guest, and more like adding someone new to a crowded neighbourhood. That can help, do very little, or make things noisy for a while. And that is where the older kitchen practices are worth looking at again. We should not look at them as a cure or as a replacement for medical advice. And we should not pretend the past had some secret scientific language we lost. It was much simpler than that. Our grandparents did not know the word microbiome. They just kept certain living foods in the ordinary rhythm of the kitchen. I think of the kind of breakfast table many people still remember. Oatmeal, eggs, toast, coffee, something plain and familiar. And then someone sets down a little jar or bowl of something sour. Maybe cabbage, maybe pickled vegetables, maybe cultured milk. Not a lot, just enough to take with the meal. A child makes a face at the sharpness. Someone laughs and says, "You'll like it when you're older." Someone else takes a second spoonful without saying anything at all. Nobody calls it a probiotic. Nobody stops breakfast to explain colony-forming units. It is just one of those things that belongs on the table. That small scene matters because it shows the difference between a product and a pattern. The modern bottle asks for attention. It wants you to remember it, compare it, reorder it, maybe subscribe to it. The old food usually did the opposite. It disappeared into the meal. It sat next to potatoes, went with bread, cut through something heavy, made winter food taste less flat, and gave a plain plate a little brightness. That is the first small payoff in this story. Before anything was branded as gut support, there was often just a family table with a little sour side in the middle. Someone passing the jar, someone taking too much, someone else pretending not to like it and then reaching for it again. People fermented vegetables because harvest came all at once. They soured milk because milk did not keep forever. They packed cucumbers in brine because food needed to last. They kept crocks in cool places because the season would change whether the pantry was ready or not. Out of that practical rhythm came foods that modern wellness later learned how to sell back to us. Take cabbage. There may be no less glamorous vegetable. It is heavy, pale, cheap, and patient. But slice it thin, add salt, and press it with your hands, and it begins to change. The salt draws out its liquid. The bowl that looked too full suddenly collapses into something you can pack down. You put it into a jar or a crock. You keep it under its brine, you weigh it down. And then comes the part modern life finds almost suspicious. You leave it alone. No app, no powder, no 30-day challenge, just time. A few days later, the jar is different. The brine is a little cloudy. There may be bubbles at the side of the glass. The smell has shifted from raw cabbage to something sharper and greener. That is not proof of a cure. It is proof of a process. And maybe that is why the jar feels so different from the capsule. The capsule hides its story. The jar lets you watch one happen. Sauerkraut became familiar in American food partly through German immigrant kitchens. But the practice is bigger than one country. Cabbage, salt, pressure, cool storage. This is household logic. Later, that cabbage came to the table in small amounts. A forkful with potatoes. A spoonful beside sausage. A little sourness with soup or bread. Not a giant bowl as a gut reset, just a side. That portion is important. Old kitchens were not usually eating fermented foods like a project. They were eating them like food. And food that fits naturally into a meal has a better chance of becoming a habit than anything that requires you to reinvent your personality. Pickles are where we have to slow down, because this is one of the easiest places to get confused. A cucumber in vinegar can be a pickle, And a cucumber fermented in salty brine can also be a pickle. Both can be sour and delicious, but they are not the same process. A quick vinegar pickle is made sour because acid is added. A fermented pickle becomes sour as bacteria in the brine produce acid over time. That difference matters because people hear pickle and think probiotic, but sour does not automatically mean alive. A shelf-stable jar of vinegar pickles can still be wonderful. It just should not be treated as the same thing as a brined pickle that changed over time. Traditional brined pickles have their own place in American food memory, especially the Jewish deli pickle barrel. Garlic, dill, salt brine, half sours, full sours. They brought sharpness and crunch, and they carried memory from immigrant kitchens into city food shops and family habits. That is the part I do not want to lose. Not the romance of the past, but the practicality of it. Then there is cultured dairy. Yogurt, kefir, cultured buttermilk. For many modern households, this is the easiest place to begin because it does not require a crock in the corner or a family willing to tolerate the smell of fermenting cabbage. But even here, the label matters. A yogurt is not automatically a meaningful probiotic product just because it is yogurt. Some have live and active cultures. Some are heat-treated. Some have so much sugar and flavouring that they are closer to dessert than to the plain cultured food people picture. Kefir can be a good everyday option for some people, but not everyone tolerates it. So the honest advice is simple. Look for live and active cultures. Choose plain more often than sweet. Start small. And pay attention to how your body responds. Food does not become better when we force it to pretend to be medicine. These foods can simply support a pattern, more variety, more flavour, and a little more room at the table for food that has changed slowly. Sourdough deserves a short mention because it is one of the most beloved fermented foods and also one of the easiest to overclaim. A sourdough starter is alive. Anyone who has fed one knows that. But after the bread is baked, we should not talk about it like a live probiotic food. The heat changes the story. That does not make sourdough worthless. It just means we should love it for what it is, a traditional fermented bread, not a probiotic capsule disguised as toast. This kind of honesty is how old remedies stay useful instead of becoming new exaggerations. Now, where does that leave the modern capsule? It still has a place. If you are taking antibiotics, it may be worth asking your doctor or pharmacist whether a specific probiotic makes sense for you. If you have a diagnosed digestive condition, keep the question narrow. What strain is it? What is it for? And does it actually fit your situation? That is usually better than asking which bottle has the biggest number. And just as important, ask whether it is safe for you. For many healthy adults, common probiotics are low risk, but they are not automatically harmless for everyone. People who are severely ill, immunocompromised, premature infants, or people with certain medical devices like central lines are in a different category. Living organisms deserve respect, even when they are sold in friendly packaging. For everyday life, though, I would make the modern version small and practical, something you can actually do on a normal day. At breakfast, that might mean plain yogurt with live cultures stirred into oats instead of a sweet yogurt that tastes more like dessert. At lunch, it might mean adding a forkful of naturally fermented sauerkraut to eggs, potatoes, soup, or a sandwich plate. At dinner, it might mean a real brined pickle on the side. Not because it is a miracle, but because it brings crunch, sourness, and an old food process back to the table. Small is the point. A spoonful, a forkful, a few bites with a meal. Enough to notice, not enough to punish yourself. And before buying, check what you are actually getting. If it is yogurt, look for live and active cultures. If it is sauerkraut or pickles, look for words like naturally fermented, raw, live cultures, or refrigerated. And remember that vinegar pickled is not the same as fermented. Delicious, yes. Automatically probiotic, no. Then feed the rest of the pattern, because your gut is not only shaped by new microbes you might add, it is also shaped by what you regularly give the microbes already there. Oats, beans, lentils, vegetables, fruit, whole grains, nuts and seeds if you tolerate them. Ordinary foods with fibre. Nothing glamorous, but very much part of the old household logic. That is where the older pattern becomes useful again. It was not one capsule floating above a chaotic diet. It was food inside meals. A sour side with dinner, cultured milk with breakfast, beans and grains and vegetables and soups. So what did people use before probiotic capsules took over? A lot of ordinary things. Brine, cultured milk, cabbage, cucumbers, crocks, jars, and a habit of eating small amounts often enough that they became unremarkable. That does not mean the old way replaces medical care. It does not mean sauerkraut is better than a studied probiotic for a specific situation. It does not mean every pickle is alive or every yogurt is therapeutic. It means the older kitchen had something the modern shelf often forgets. A pattern that was easy to repeat because it belonged to the meal. So the next time you see a probiotic bottle with a very large number on the front, you do not have to be angry at it. And you do not have to be impressed by it either. Just slow down for a second. Ask what it is for. Ask whether the claim is specific or vague. And if you are buying it because you feel confused, maybe check your kitchen first. Could one small fermented food fit into a meal you already eat? Could breakfast use plain yogurt instead of another capsule you are not sure about? Could lunch handle a spoonful of sauerkraut or dinner a real brined pickle? That is not as dramatic as a gut reset, but it is the kind of thing a person can actually keep doing. I'd love to know what lived in your family's kitchen before probiotics became an aisle. Was there sauerkraut in the fridge? Kefir on the table? Buttermilk, yogurt, or a jar of real brined pickles? Tell me in the comments. Those little kitchen memories often point us toward the next episode. And if this kind of practical, old-world household wisdom is why you're here, subscribe to Old World Remedies. There are many more forgotten ways that still make sense today.